Note that the user story map that we have come up now is part of Envision Your Solution step of the product discovery exercise. At this point, we need to understand that there are other activities happening too apart from building solution using user story map. These other activities complement your activity of building the map. So let us understand what these activities are, as you would also be involved in them to some extent. At least you need to know what is going on there, because the result of those activities will impact how your map shapes up. One activity is related to the usability aspect of your future product. The team members responsible for the user interface and other usability aspects will be sketching UI prototypes and validating them with the users. These prototypes may be paper prototypes or simple wireframes to begin with, and as they go through multiple rounds of validations with the users, they will refine them further. And once they've got a version that the users like, they can place these screenshots in the map to share with the team. The other activity is related to the feasibility aspect of your future product, where a few members of the development team will be involved on the technical aspects of the product, such as the software architecture. Sometimes the team might identify a significant risk from the user story map. It may have to do with unknown technology, performance or scalability concern, etc. In such cases, development will perform a feasibility prototyping where they will write just enough code to mitigate that technical risk. Since they get to see the big picture with the user story map, they truly understand users' problems. As they can see the whole product from the eyes of the end user in the map, they even come up with a better solution for the user's problem. Solution that gives the same user experience, but that can be built in a much lesser time. Recall that I mentioned about these prototypes that the usability team member will build in the step of envisioning the solution. Now let's get a bit more into that. I also mentioned that you will take these prototypes to the users who will be actually using them and hopefully buying your solution. So what you're doing here is testing your solution with the users without doing real coding or development. And you're doing this validation in multiple rounds. You sketch some UIs, take them to the users, learn from their feedback and incorporate them back to your work. So what we are doing here is adopting a strategy called validated learning. It is a process of finding the right solution through small cycles of building prototypes, validating them with the actual users, learning from the feedback from these validations, and incorporating it back to your product. And we call this a build, measure, learn cycle. So what exactly happens in the cycle? In the build stage, we build minimal prototypes, just enough to validate our assumption. We must do this quickly and minimally. It could be as simple as a paper prototype or a short video, etc., which could just take a few hours to develop. Next stage is measure, where we test the prototype with the real users and get feedback from the customers, either directly by talking to them or indirectly through data collected from the prototypes. The third stage is learn, we learn from the user validation in order to make one of the following decisions. Do we have sufficient indication from the prototype feedback that we can now start with the real development of the feature? Or do we have feedback from the users that we must incorporate into our prototype? So in this case, we go back to build with the new learnings and repeat the process. Last but not the least, do we drop the feature altogether because the customer does not want it? Every build, measure, learn cycle lasts for a few days, which means that within a week or two, you have made a decision of whether to go ahead with the delivery or discard the feature altogether. If dropping the idea of the feature or the product is the conclusion, then we must celebrate this fact instead of treating this as a failure. That's because we have saved ourselves months of development effort running into thousands or even millions of dollars. But if the conclusion is A, then we can move ahead to the next step towards product development, which is the next step after the step of envisioning the solution. And you will move to that step with confidence that there are enough customers who will take your solution. Note that these activities of building user story maps, UI prototypes, and technical prototypes will feed each other. That is, output of one will act as input for the other. For example, some functionality coming out of user story map might trigger UX team to decide on the UI prototype. And after you receive the feedback from the user, you might need to correct your understanding of how users use the product, leading to changes in the map. Similarly, some functionality in the map might trigger development team to think about technical feasibility. Result of that might lead the team to suggest changes in the way users could use the product and hence the updation of the map. So that was a brief about what is done as part of envisioning your solution. User story maps, UI prototypes with build, measure, learn cycle, and technical feasibility.